Radio static crackles through the cockpit speakers as Flight 182 begins its final descent into what should have been a routine landing. The morning sun casts long shadows across the runway below, and passengers settle into their seats, unaware that in mere minutes, their world will be torn apart in one of aviation's most horrifying tragedies. The calm voice of air traffic control guides the aircraft through its approach, but hidden beneath this veneer of normalcy lurks a catastrophic failure that will forever change how we understand the limits of human engineering and the fragile boundary between life and death at 30,000 feet above the Earth. This is the story of a flight that began like any other, but ended in circumstances so shocking that they would fundamentally alter the way we think about aircraft safety and structural integrity. Flight 182 represented everything that modern aviation had promised to deliver to the traveling public during the golden age of commercial flight. The aircraft itself was a marvel of engineering excellence, a testament to decades of innovation in aeronautical design and manufacturing that had transformed human transportation in ways that previous generations could never have imagined. Built with meticulous attention to detail and equipped with the most advanced safety systems available at the time, this particular aircraft had logged thousands of hours of flawless operation across countless routes, carrying passengers safely between destinations while maintaining an impeccable service record that inspired confidence among both crew members and travelers alike. The manufacturing process had involved thousands of skilled workers, engineers, and quality control specialists who had poured their expertise into creating what they believed to be one of the safest aircraft ever produced. The airline that operated this flight had built its reputation on reliability and safety over decades of operation, establishing itself as a trusted carrier that prioritized passenger welfare above all other considerations. Management had invested heavily in implementing rigorous maintenance protocols that went beyond regulatory requirements, creating a culture of safety consciousness that permeated every level of the organization from ground crews to senior executives. The company's training programs exceeded industry standards by significant margins, with pilots and flight attendants undergoing regular recertification processes that ensured they remained current on the latest safety procedures and emergency response techniques. This commitment to excellence had earned the airline numerous safety awards and recognition from industry organizations that monitored performance across the global aviation community. Captain James Morrison had dedicated over 20 years of his life to mastering the art and science of commercial aviation, beginning his career as a young flight instructor before transitioning to regional airlines and eventually earning his position with this major carrier. His logbook contained more than 15,000 hours of flight time across multiple aircraft types, weather conditions, and international routes that had taken him to destinations around the world. Morrison was known among his peers for his calm demeanor under pressure, his encyclopedic knowledge of aircraft systems, and his unwavering commitment to safety that had earned him respect throughout the aviation community. He had successfully navigated numerous challenging situations throughout his career, from severe weather encounters to mechanical malfunctions, always prioritizing the safety of his passengers and crew above all other considerations. His co-pilot, Sarah Chen, represented the new generation of aviators who were bringing fresh perspectives and cutting-edge training methodologies to complement the experience of veteran pilots like Morrison. She had graduated at the top of her class from one of the nation's most prestigious aviation programs, demonstrating exceptional aptitude for both the technical and human factors aspects of commercial flight operations. Her training had included extensive simulator work with emergency scenarios, crew resource management techniques, and the latest advances in aviation technology that were revolutionizing cockpit operations. Despite her relatively shorter time in commercial aviation, Chen had already established herself as a skilled and reliable pilot who approached every flight with the professionalism and attention to detail that defined the best in the industry. Together, Morrison and Chen formed a flight crew that embodied the highest standards of professional aviation, having worked together on numerous flights over the past year, and developed the kind of seamless communication and mutual trust that defines exceptional cockpit resource management. Their partnership represented the perfect blend of experience and innovation, with Morrison's years of practical knowledge complementing Chen's fresh training and enthusiasm for the latest safety procedures. They had successfully handled various challenging situations together, from difficult weather conditions to minor mechanical issues, always maintaining the calm professionalism that passengers had come to expect from commercial airline crews. Flight attendant Maria Rodriguez had been with the airline for 12 years, building a reputation among passengers and colleagues alike for her warmth, professionalism, and unwavering dedication to passenger safety and comfort. She had joined the airline shortly after completing her college degree, drawn to the travel opportunities and the chance to work in an industry that she had admired since childhood. Over the years, Rodriguez had developed an intuitive understanding of passenger needs and concerns, often going above and beyond to ensure that travelers felt comfortable and secure during their journeys. Her experience included handling various emergency situations, from medical incidents to severe turbulence, always maintaining her composure while providing reassurance and assistance to passengers who needed support. Her colleague, David Kim, brought 5 years of experience and a reputation for exceptional customer service that had earned him recognition within the company's flight attendant community. Kim had initially pursued a career in hospitality management before discovering his passion for aviation, drawn by the opportunity to combine his customer service skills with the unique challenges and responsibilities of ensuring passenger safety at 30,000 feet. His training had been extensive, covering everything from emergency evacuations to first aid procedures, and he had consistently received outstanding evaluations from supervisors and positive feedback from passengers who appreciated his attentive and professional service. The morning of the flight dawned clear and bright, with weather conditions that meteorologists described as ideal for aviation operations. The forecast called for unlimited visibility, light winds, and stable atmospheric conditions that promised smooth sailing for the journey ahead. Airport operations were running smoothly, with minimal delays and normal traffic volumes that suggested a routine day in the world of commercial aviation. The ground crews had completed their pre-flight preparations with characteristic efficiency, ensuring that the aircraft was properly fueled, catered, and equipped for the upcoming flight. Passengers began arriving at the gate early, creating the familiar bustle of activity that characterized busy airport terminals around the world. The passenger manifest represented a diverse cross-section of humanity, each person carrying their own unique story and purpose for taking this particular flight on this particular day. Business travelers hurried through the terminal with their laptops and briefcases, focused on important meetings and deadlines that awaited them at their destinations. Families moved more slowly, managing children and luggage while discussing the adventures that lay ahead during their vacations or visits with relatives. Among the passengers was Margaret Thompson, a 72-year-old grandmother who was embarking on what she had described to friends as the most important journey of her life. She was traveling to meet her first grandchild, a baby girl who had been born just 2 weeks earlier to her daughter who lived across the country. Thompson's carry-on bag was filled with carefully chosen gifts that she had been collecting for months in anticipation of this moment, including a handmade blanket that had taken her weeks to complete, and a collection of children's books that she hoped to read to her granddaughter as she grew up. Her excitement was palpable as she spoke with other passengers in the boarding area, sharing photographs and stories about her expanding family. Robert Martinez, a 34-year-old aerospace engineer, was returning home after completing a challenging 6-month project at a manufacturing facility that produced components for commercial aircraft. Ironically, his work had involved developing new inspection techniques for detecting metal fatigue in aircraft structures, research that was aimed at preventing exactly the type of failure that was about to claim his life. Martinez was looking forward to reuniting with his wife of 8 years and their 2 young children, planning to surprise them with gifts he had purchased during his travels and stories of the interesting people he had met while working away from home. He had already called his wife from the airport to let her know that his flight was on time and that he would be home in time for dinner. The passenger list also included Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a renowned pediatric surgeon who was traveling to participate in a medical conference where she planned to present her latest research on innovative surgical techniques for treating children with complex heart conditions. Her work had saved hundreds of young lives over the course of her career, and she was widely regarded as one of the leading experts in her field. Harper had spent the previous evening reviewing her presentation materials and was excited about the opportunity to share her knowledge with colleagues from around the world who shared her passion for advancing pediatric medical care. Among the passengers was also Thomas Wright, a recently retired high school teacher who had dedicated 35 years of his life to educating young people in mathematics and science. Wright was using his newfound freedom from the classroom to pursue his lifelong dream of traveling to visit historical sites and museums that he had only been able to show his students through textbooks and documentaries. This flight was taking him to the first destination on a carefully planned itinerary that would occupy the next several months of his retirement, and he had filled his carry-on bag with guidebooks and cameras to document his adventures. Pre-flight preparations proceeded with the methodical precision that characterized professional aviation operations around the world. Captain Morrison arrived at the airport well before the scheduled departure time, as was his custom, allowing himself ample opportunity to review weather reports, flight planning documents, and any notices regarding airport or route conditions that might affect their journey. He conducted his pre-flight briefing with characteristic thoroughness, discussing with his crew the expected flight conditions, alternate airports, and any special considerations that might apply to their particular route and aircraft configuration. The walk-around inspection that Morrison performed was a ritual that he had completed thousands of times throughout his career, but he approached it with the same careful attention to detail that had marked his very first day as a commercial pilot. He examined every visible component of the aircraft exterior, looking for any signs of damage, wear, or irregularity that might indicate potential problems. The tires were checked for proper inflation and tread wear. The engines were inspected for any signs of oil leaks or foreign object damage, and the control surfaces were examined to ensure they moved freely and showed no signs of structural problems. Unknown to Morrison, the microscopic cracks that would soon prove catastrophic were already present in the aircraft structure, but they remained completely invisible to even the most thorough visual inspection techniques available at the time. The maintenance log showed no outstanding issues, and all required inspections had been completed on schedule with no discrepancies noted by the airline's maintenance department. The aircraft had recently undergone a comprehensive maintenance check that involved detailed inspections of all major systems and structural components performed by certified technicians who followed established procedures designed to identify any potential safety concerns. The paperwork associated with these maintenance activities filled several thick binders, documenting every task performed, every part replaced, and every system tested during the aircraft's time in the maintenance hangar. Sarah Chen worked through her portion of the pre-flight checklist with equal attention to detail, methodically verifying instrument readings, testing communication systems, and confirming that all electronic displays were functioning properly according to established parameters. Her training had emphasized the critical importance of these pre-flight procedures, as they represented the last opportunity to identify potential problems before committing to flight operations. She checked radio frequencies, navigation equipment, weather radar systems, and the complex array of electronic instruments that provided pilots with the information needed to safely operate modern commercial aircraft. The flight attendants completed their safety checks with professional competence, ensuring that emergency equipment was properly positioned and that the cabin was configured for departure according to established protocols. Rodriguez and Kim methodically verified that oxygen bottles were properly charged, that life vests were in their designated locations, and that emergency exits were clear of obstructions. They checked that safety demonstration equipment was functioning properly, and that all passenger service items were properly secured for takeoff. Their experience had taught them that attention to these details, while seemingly routine, could prove critical in an emergency situation where seconds might determine the difference between life and death. As passengers settled into their seats and stowed their belongings in overhead compartments, the familiar routine of commercial aviation unfolded exactly as it had thousands of times before on flights around the world. The boarding process proceeded smoothly, with passengers finding their assigned seats and flight attendants providing assistance with carry-on luggage and answering questions about the flight. Safety demonstrations were conducted with professional competence, though most passengers paid little attention to instructions they had heard countless times before, never imagining that the emergency procedures being explained might soon become desperately relevant to their survival. The aircraft pushed back from the gate, precisely on schedule, with ground crews efficiently disconnecting power cords and removing wheel chocks, while the pilots received clearance for taxi operations. Captain Morrison received clearance for taxi to the active runway, and the aircraft began its journey across the airport's surface toward the departure runway. Radio communications with ground control proceeded normally, with standard phraseology exchanged between the flight crew and air traffic controllers who were managing the complex choreography of airport operations that involved dozens of aircraft simultaneously arriving, departing, and maneuvering on the ground. Takeoff proceeded flawlessly, with the powerful engines accelerating the aircraft down the runway, while Morrison and Chen monitored engine parameters and flight controls to ensure everything was operating within normal limits. The aircraft lifted off into clear skies at exactly the calculated rotation speed, beginning its climb toward cruising altitude, while following the departure procedure that would take them away from the airport traffic area and onto their planned route. Passengers felt the familiar sensation of acceleration and climb, many relaxing immediately as the aircraft became airborne and began what they expected to be an uneventful journey to their destination. As the aircraft reached its assigned cruising altitude of 37,000 feet, the autopilot engaged to maintain steady flight, while the crew settled into the routine monitoring duties that characterized normal cruise operations. Everything about the flight appeared completely normal, following patterns that had been repeated safely millions of times across the global aviation system. Passengers unbuckled their seatbelts and began moving about the cabin, some visiting lavatories, others retrieving reading materials from their carry-on bags, and many simply settling back to rest during what they anticipated would be several hours of peaceful flight time. However, deep within the aircraft structure, forces were at work that would soon transform this routine flight into one of aviation's most tragic disasters. Microscopic cracks that had developed over years of pressurization cycles were approaching their critical threshold, growing imperceptibly with each flight as the aircraft fuselage expanded and contracted during the climb to altitude and subsequent descent for landing. Metal fatigue, that invisible enemy of aviation safety that engineers had long recognized as a potential threat, had been working silently and relentlessly to weaken crucial structural components throughout the aircraft's operational life. The repeated expansion and contraction of the fuselage during each flight cycle had gradually propagated these tiny fractures through the aluminum skin of the aircraft, creating an interconnected network of potential failure points that remained completely undetectable to the routine inspection techniques available at the time. The engineering calculations that had determined the aircraft's certified service life were based on statistical models, laboratory testing, and computer simulations that attempted to predict how aircraft structures would behave under the stresses of normal operations. But the harsh realities of actual operational conditions sometimes exceeded even the most conservative safety margins built into these calculations. The specific location where the catastrophic failure would begin was a point where multiple structural loads converged, creating stress concentrations that exceeded the designer's original assumptions about how forces would be distributed throughout the airframe. Years of normal operations had gradually weakened the material at this critical location, while routine inspections had failed to detect the growing threat because the cracks remained below the threshold of visibility for existing non-destructive testing methods. At 37,000 feet above the Earth, with passengers and crew going about their normal in-flight routines, completely unaware of the disaster that was about to unfold, the accumulated stress finally exceeded the material's ability to contain the pressurized cabin environment. The failure began at a single point where multiple stress concentrations had created the perfect conditions for catastrophic crack propagation, a location that had been experiencing gradually increasing loads for years without anyone realizing the danger that was developing. In a fraction of a second that seemed to last an eternity for those who experienced it, what started as a small opening in the fuselage wall expanded exponentially, tearing through the aircraft skin with devastating speed and violence that defied human comprehension. The explosive decompression that followed transformed the peaceful cabin environment into a scene of absolute chaos and terror, as the pressure differential between the inside and outside of the aircraft created forces that no commercial airliner had ever been designed to withstand. The sudden loss of cabin pressure created winds of incredible velocity that swept through the interior space with the force of a hurricane, turning loose objects into deadly projectiles and creating a maelstrom of destruction that no human being could survive. Passengers who had been peacefully seated moments before, reading books or dozing comfortably, were suddenly subjected to forces that exceeded anything in their worst nightmares, as the very air they breathed became a weapon against them and the cabin environment disintegrated around them with shocking violence. Oxygen masks deployed automatically as designed, but the catastrophic nature of the structural failure made it impossible for passengers to reach them or use them effectively. The noise level became so extreme that communication was impossible, while the violent rush of air made it difficult to see or maintain any sense of orientation within the aircraft. Those passengers who remained conscious in the thin air at high altitude found themselves in a nightmare scenario that aviation safety experts had long feared but hoped would never occur in the real world of commercial aviation operations. Captain Morrison and his crew found themselves fighting not just for control of their aircraft, but for their very lives as the cockpit environment disintegrated around them with shocking suddenness. The explosive decompression had created immediate threats to their survival, while simultaneously making it nearly impossible to implement the emergency procedures that they had practiced countless times in flight simulators. The sudden depressurization created a noise level that made communication between crew members impossible, while the violent rush of air through the damaged fuselage made it difficult to see instruments or maintain any semblance of normal flight operations. Emergency procedures that had been practiced countless times in simulators under controlled conditions proved inadequate for the reality of this catastrophic failure, as the aircraft systems themselves began to fail under the extreme conditions created by the structural damage. The flight controls became increasingly unresponsive as additional structural damage compromised the aircraft's ability to maintain controlled flight, while electrical systems began failing as wiring and components were damaged by the violence of the decompression event. The structural damage continued to propagate throughout the aircraft with relentless momentum, as additional sections of the fuselage began to separate under aerodynamic loads that far exceeded their design parameters. What had been a precisely engineered flying machine just moments before became a collection of debris held together by increasingly tenuous connections, tumbling through the sky in a manner that bore no resemblance to the controlled flight that had characterized the journey up to this point. The passengers and crew, those who remained conscious in the thin air at high altitude, faced circumstances that no training or preparation could have adequately prepared them for. The violence of the structural failure had transformed their aircraft from a safe and comfortable means of transportation into a death trap from which there could be no escape. Some passengers may have had brief moments of consciousness during the aircraft's final plunge, experiencing terror beyond human description as they realized that their lives were ending in circumstances that defied all reasonable expectations of aviation safety. In the final moments of Flight 182, as the aircraft continued to break apart in the sky above the unsuspecting landscape below, each person aboard faced their mortality in circumstances that no human being should ever have to endure. The crew members who had dedicated their careers to aviation safety and had successfully handled numerous challenging situations throughout their professional lives found themselves powerless to prevent the tragedy unfolding around them. Their years of training and experience rendered meaningless by forces that exceeded all human control and understanding. Captain Morrison, in what may have been his final conscious moments, likely attempted to follow the emergency procedures that had been drilled into him through years of training, even as the aircraft systems around him failed and the very structure of the airplane disintegrated. His co-pilot Sarah Chen, despite her relative youth and shorter experience in commercial aviation, would have fought alongside him to regain control of their aircraft, drawing upon her extensive training to attempt solutions that might save the lives of everyone aboard. The flight attendants, Rodriguez and Kim, trained to assist passengers during emergencies, found themselves in a situation where their skills and dedication could not overcome the overwhelming forces that were tearing their aircraft apart. Their final moments were likely spent attempting to help passengers even as the cabin environment became unsurvivable, demonstrating the courage and professionalism that define the best in aviation personnel. Passengers who had trusted in the safety of commercial aviation, based on decades of successful operations and continuous safety improvements, discovered that even the most carefully designed systems could fail catastrophically when subjected to conditions that exceeded all reasonable expectations and engineering margins. Margaret Thompson, who had been so excited about meeting her first grandchild, Thomas Wright, who was beginning his retirement adventures, Dr. Harper, whose medical skills had saved so many lives, and Robert Martinez, whose engineering work had ironically focused on preventing exactly this type of structural failure. all found their life stories ending in circumstances that shocked the aviation world. The aircraft debris scattered across a wide area of rural landscape, creating multiple impact sites that would challenge investigators and first responders who rushed to the scene. The violence of the in-flight breakup had distributed wreckage over several miles, with the heaviest components following ballistic trajectories that carried them far from the initial failure point. Emergency response teams from multiple jurisdictions converged on the impact area, but the catastrophic nature of the structural failure had left little hope for survivors among the passengers and crew. The investigation that followed would consume years of effort by some of the world's most qualified aviation safety experts as they worked to understand exactly how such a catastrophic failure could occur in an aircraft that had met all applicable safety standards and maintenance requirements. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board, the Federal Aviation Administration, the aircraft manufacturer, and the airline worked together to piece together the sequence of events that had led to this tragedy, examining every piece of recovered wreckage and analyzing every aspect of the aircraft's design, manufacturing, and operational history. What investigators eventually discovered would fundamentally reshape the aviation industry's understanding of metal fatigue and structural integrity in commercial aircraft. The accident revealed that current inspection techniques were inadequate for detecting the types of microscopic cracks that had caused this catastrophic failure, leading to the development of new non-destructive testing methods that could identify potential problems before they reached critical dimensions. The investigation also highlighted the need for better understanding of how aircraft structures behave under the accumulated stresses of years of operational service, particularly in areas where multiple loads converge to create complex stress patterns. The tragedy of Flight 182 became the catalyst for implementing enhanced structural inspection requirements that have since prevented similar accidents from occurring throughout the global aviation system. New regulations were developed that required more frequent and detailed inspections of critical structural areas, using advanced techniques that could detect cracks far smaller than those visible to traditional inspection methods. The aircraft manufacturing industry also responded by developing new materials and design approaches that were more resistant to fatigue cracking and better able to withstand the stresses of long-term operational service.
The families of those lost in this tragedy became powerful advocates for aviation safety improvements, working closely with investigators, regulators, and industry representatives to ensure that the lessons learned from their loved ones' deaths would benefit future generations of air travelers.
Their efforts contributed to significant changes in aircraft maintenance procedures, inspection intervals, and the development of new technologies for monitoring aircraft structural health in real time during flight operations. These families demonstrated remarkable strength and determination in channeling their grief into positive action that would help prevent similar tragedies in the future. Modern aircraft now incorporate multiple layers of protection against the type of catastrophic failure that destroyed Flight 182, including redundant pressure barriers, improved materials that are more resistant to fatigue cracking, and sophisticated monitoring systems that can detect structural problems long before they become critical. Advanced computer modeling and testing techniques allow engineers to better predict how aircraft structures will behave over their operational lifetimes, while new inspection technologies provide maintenance personnel with unprecedented ability to identify potential problems before they pose safety risks. The aviation industry's response to this tragedy exemplifies how commercial aviation has consistently evolved to become safer through the careful analysis of accidents and the implementation of comprehensive safety improvements that address both the immediate causes and the underlying systemic issues that contributed to the event. Every aspect of aircraft design, manufacturing, maintenance, and operation has been influenced by the lessons learned from Flight 182. Creating a safer environment for the millions of passengers who fly every day around the world. The legacy of Flight 182 and its crew continues to influence aviation safety practices around the world, serving as a sobering reminder that constant vigilance and continuous improvement are essential to maintaining the extraordinary safety record that modern commercial aviation has achieved through decades of dedication to learning from past tragedies. The names of those who died aboard this flight are commemorated in memorial services and safety training programs that ensure their sacrifice will never be forgotten by those who work to make flying safer for everyone.
Every passenger who flies today benefits from the lessons learned through this tragic event, as the aviation community has successfully transformed the pain of loss into meaningful progress toward preventing similar tragedies in the future. The structural inspection techniques, materials science advances, and safety management systems that protect modern air travelers all trace their development back to the investigation of Flight 182 and the determination of safety professionals to ensure that
such a catastrophic failure would never occur again. If you found this story as compelling and educational as we intended, please consider subscribing to our channel where we continue to explore the fascinating and sometimes tragic world of aviation safety. Your engagement helps us create more content that honors the memory of those we've lost, while educating viewers about the incredible efforts that go into making flying the safest form of travel ever developed. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below and join our community of aviation enthusiasts who believe that understanding the past is essential to building a safer future for all who take to the skies. Remember to hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest investigations into the stories that have shaped modern aviation safety. And don't forget to share this video with others who might benefit from learning about these important lessons from aviation history that continue to protect lives today. Together, we can honor those who have been lost by ensuring that their stories continue to educate and inspire improvements in aviation safety for generations to come.